This is Kugan Cassius for iFilm London. We're in the Matchroom TV studios here in Brentwood in Essex. With me, I have the promoter and owner of this establishment, Edward Hearn. Hello, Edward.
How are you, old boy?
I'm very well. Right, we're going to have to jump straight into it because there's a lot of questions. First of all, apologies if your question wasn't asked. There was over 1,400.
Don't moan.
Please don't moan. The way it's going to work, I will read the questions out. Eddie hasn't seen the questions, believe it or not. And every question Eddie thinks was a good one, he'll give a pair of tickets away to Carpe Diem this Saturday.
At the O2.
At the O2, 5th of October. Right. Tune in on Sky Sports if you don't win. Right, Eddie.
Okay.
Can we just quickly... No, we'll talk about it at the end. That's fine. Okay. Jamie Bourne. Nice and easy. Plans for Lee Selby in 2014.
Well, interestingly, the EBU have just put out... He's in the mandatory for the European title. We were given Yefamovich, who was a Ukrainian fighter. He pulled out. Then it went to Simeon, who he's beat before. He pulled out. And now we're at Rendell Monroe. Quite unbelievably. So if we want to fight for the European title, we've got to fight Rendell Monroe. Lee's going to clean up domestically against Ryan Walsh on Saturday. Still a tough fight, but that's to win the Lonsdale belt outright. Then potentially give that up and the Commonwealth and fight for the European, or he also has the WBC International belt. I'm looking at a world title fight for Lee Selby back end of 2014. The European title is always nice to pick up. It's a prestigious belt, but we just got to look into really what a fight against Monroe would do for him in that world standing position. I want to try and manoeuvre him into that world title shot, and sort of giving up a fight would potentially set him back 3 or 4 months if it wasn't progressing him in the right way, through the rankings or towards that shot at world title.
Okay. Robin Whitehead, do you have any interest in signing Jamie McDonnell?
I don't really talk about fighters that are with other people or represented by. Otherwise, I think it's a little bit disrespectful. Jamie's a great fighter. He's one of the 4 world champions. I've reached out to Dennis Hobson, his manager, and made them some offers to fight on our shows. If we can do a deal, then I don't see why not. Obviously, he's a world champion. He's a great fighter, very popular. He hasn't got a regular broadcast partner, which I think has affected him in terms of profile and standing. He's not one of the better known world champions, that's for sure. But a great fighter, and if something could be worked out of his team, then absolutely.
Okay. This is from Scott McKenzie. Eddie, what's the largest animal that you think you could catch if it was fired at you from a cannon?
Sort of like a medium-sized dog.
Yeah.
Perhaps a Labrador, but not a chubby lab. You know what I mean?
A standard one.
Yeah. You start looking at lurchers and Rhodesian Ridgebacks, and I think they're just going to be, at that velocity, I think it's going to be a problem.
Would be a problem.
Definitely no tickets for that question.
Definitely not. Raheem Ahmed says, Kell Brook keeps expressing that he wants to knock Khan Chin clean, but Khan possible opponent, no confirmation, for 7th December is Devon Alexander. If Khan does win that, it's most likely Mayweather next for him. So do you think that the Brook fight will ever happen, or will it be too late because Kell Brook is a big welterweight and might struggle making weight late in his career?
Firstly, we'll give a pair of tickets for that.
Yeah?
I think it's not the greatest question of all time, but I think there's some interesting points to discuss. Firstly, there's nothing clear that Amir Khan will fight Mayweather next or at any time. Of course, it's the fight he wants. It's the big money fight that most people around that division would want. If he fights Devon Alexander, it's a voluntary defence of Alexander's IBF title. Kell Brook is the mandatory challenger for the IBF title. The mandatory fight, which happens every 9 months when it's called upon by the IBF, was taken care of when Devon Alexander fought Lee Purdy, as it went down the rankings. That was back in May. So, where are we? February-ish time, they'll call for the next mandatory. So, if Alexander beats Khan, or if Khan beats Alexander, they will get a note from the IBF in February, providing Brook beats Senchenko, to say, Kell Brook is your mandatory, so please begin negotiations. Now, we all know that a unification fight can, most of the time, supersede a mandatory challenge. So, in answer to that question, if Khan won, then fought Mayweather, Brook would potentially have to wait. If Khan can't get the fight with Mayweather, then Brook is the biggest financial, option, the best financial option outside of a Mayweather fight for Khan. Personally, I think Alexander beats Khan, and that fight hasn't even been signed yet. So a lot of, and this is one thing about the boxing game. You have to be on your toes. You have to be thinking. It's a huge chess game, but Kell Brook has a big fight on October 26th against Senchenko. Every fight now is a risk for Kell Brook because he has to stay. If he loses that mandatory position, which we worked for 5 or 6 fights to get to. So I still think Brook Khan is a natural fight for spring 2014, and financially the biggest fight for Khan outside of an of a Mayweather fight.
Okay. Paul McAllister says, Eddie has said loads of times over the last few months in interviews with your channel and others that pay-per-view on Sky depends on the fight, not the fighter. If that's the case, why is he so determined to make all Carl Froch's fights pay-per-view from now on? What about what he said before?
Good question. Not quite ticket material, but a few things. Firstly, I still stand by that. It's about the fight, it's not about the fighter. Even though Carl Froch's profile has increased considerably since most of the time that I was saying stuff like that, which was before the Kessler fight. Now, there were numerous fights out there for Carl Froch. Excuse me. Saved by the butterfly. That's unbelievable. Anyway, numerous fights out there for Carl Froch. And this is live telly, Kugan.
No,
you don't just
live.
have these, made-up shows where butterflies just come in and out of the
Absolutely
studio.
Not.
Carl Froch could have fought Sakio Bika. Carl Froch could have fought Thomas Oosterhausen. Carl Froch could have fought Kastanov. There's lots of different fights out there for Carl Froch. All those fights are not pay-per-view. The Bika fight was a great example. That was a chance for Carl Froch to pick up another belt. It wasn't a big enough fight. With Groves, domestically, it's a huge fight. My argument was initially it needs to come with a huge undercard. You'll be shocked by the undercard. It's a fantastic card. And also, we've seen the size of the fight. It sold out in 11 minutes. So it's a big fight. I still stand by the fact that there's such things as pay-per-view fights and not pay-per-view fighters. But Carl Froch in a big fight is pay-per-view these days. It's just like David Haye against the guy who was going to fight.
What before?
Yeah,
Char.
Manuel Char. Is not a pay-per-view fight. David Haye against Tyson Fury is a pay-per-view fight. So yes, people's profiles will enhance, and perhaps the level of opposition needed for a pay-per-view fight will reduce, but generally I stand by that. It's all about the fight, and I think Groves against Froch is a fantastic fight.
Okay, we have a slight problem with this next one because I didn't write his name. So if you like the question, I might have to do some...
Okay.
Carl Froch is a fantastic fighter who entertains and definitely deserves to reap the benefits. That said, boxing fans up and down the country might feel that despite he's achieved that, doesn't automatically mean that every single one of his fights should be pay-per-view with no questions asked.
He's saying they should be.
He's saying, but that said, boxing fans up and down the country feel that despite what he's achieved, that doesn't automatically
I agree.
Mean that every one of his fights
totally
should be
agree.
pay-per-view. Which is sort of in line with what you said.
It's the same sort of thing. Totally agree. And that's what, at the end of the day, this is a job for everyone. Me, Carl Froch, and ultimately, this is the hardest sport, in my opinion, to make a living. So you've got to try and reap the rewards. Of course, Carl Froch would love to stay on pay-per-view, on box office, for as long as possible. But we have to make the right fights. And, it's basically up to us to make sure that we make the right fights. I want to try and keep Carl Froch on pay-per-view, but they've got to be the right fights and the right events.
Nathan King, do you think you could ever take on someone as an apprentice?
Is that a fighter, Nathan King? No?
I'm not sure. To do with being a promoter?
Yeah, maybe. We get lots of emails and tweets a lot of the time, and sometimes we'd be looking for someone, and then we've just taken on a guy who's going to head up our commercial division at Matchroom Boxing, looking after the fighters' commercial interests and images and stuff like that. He's coming over from M&C Saatchi, which is obviously a big commercial sports outfit. We don't tend to recruit at a senior level. Look at our team; it's very young. So apprentices, I think that generally at certain points we'll take on people who can learn from the business, gain experience, and maybe one day work for Matchroom as well.
Okay. Dave Maybury says, hello Kugan, can you ask Eddie how Ricky Byrne is and when do you think he'll be back in the ring?
Burns.
Yeah. What did I say?
Byrne. Ricky Burns is very well. I spoke to him this morning. He can resume full training in 5 weeks' time. He can start running and swimming from Monday. So with that in mind, if he's starting full training in 5 weeks' time, which is sort of middle of November, he'll be ready to go end of January, early February. So we've reached out to Top Rank. The fight that we want and the fight that Ricky wants is the Beltran rematch. We've got the issue with Crawford, could potentially be the next mandatory, but and not just because ethically and morally we think it's the right thing to do to give the Beltran rematch. Ricky wants the rematch because he thinks that he didn't do himself justice in the fight. Obviously had a broken jaw, and for 10 rounds he couldn't do anything. So he wants to put that right, and hopefully we can get that made.
Okay, where would that be?
I believe it should be in Scotland. Wow. I'll pay Beltran more money. The officials. You've got to remember that the one British judge gave it a draw, an American Hispanic judge gave it by 3 rounds to Burns, and the Belgian gave it to Beltran. So it's sometimes it's just bad judging. It's not that something was crooked. It's just some people get decisions wrong.
Okay. A Patel, I think it's Afi Patel. Eddie, who's your favourite 3 fighters outside of Matchroom? In what order?
In what, internationally or domestically?
He hasn't specified.
Okay,
so.
Well, internationally, I would say I like Danny Garcia. I think they've slung him in a few times to lose, and I think he's come good. I think potentially they slung him in to lose against Khan. They slung him in to lose against Matisse, and he won. I like Danny Garcia. I think his dad's hilarious. I like Adrian Broner, I've got to say. I mean, not necessarily as a person, obviously he's a prat sometimes, but I do think as a lightweight he's a fantastic fighter. I'm not sure at 147. And I like Golovkin. I think he's a beast. And having spoken to Matt Macklin about his power, he seems to be a freak of nature. Domestically, the fighters I like that we haven't got. Is there anyone left? Oh, no. I like. I think Frankie Gavin's got some great skills. I think it was a terrible matchup against Barnes. It was always going to be a stinking fight, and it was a bad choice. But I think he's a great fighter. I think Stephen Smith is a really good young fighter. A great knockout over Buckland, and I guess Jamie McDonald. He's a world champ. So I think he's achieved. For him to go and win the world title was a great achievement.
Okay. Colin Griffiths, Fastcar. Is there a deadline on how late the show can end? Last week I went to London to support my mate Paul Butler, now British Commonwealth and WBO Intercontinental Champion, by the way. Didn't even see the main event.
Ticket. I think it's an important note, and give him a ticket for the O2 because he didn't get to see the main event last time.
Okay.
This is important because it's not, one thing that seems to be happening at the moment is that everybody's trying to compete with everybody. So everyone's trying to put packed cards on. So when you stack a bill with title fights, like Warren did at the Copper Box, generally it's quite difficult to get it all rounded off by midnight. You have to take into consideration transport. That was obviously an arena for the first time that they'd used that for boxing, so it's always going to have teething problems. We were surprised that the Ryder-Saunders fight was on so late. I think it didn't start till well past midnight or 12:30, which is very late. And when there's no international TV, i.e. an American broadcast partner, it's quite strange to go that late. Generally, we'll always try and finish by 12 o'clock. And most venues will have a curfew. And when I say curfew, it's a loose term because all it means is that the contract that you've signed with the venue generally will let you run till midnight. Now, if you go past that, it starts becoming very expensive. So O2, for example, this Saturday, our contract is up till midnight. I need all those fights to have finished by midnight, otherwise it's something ridiculous like 10 grand for every 15 minutes after. So if I've got a fight in the can that hasn't been on, to keep that fight on will cost me another 10 or 15 grand just to keep that fight on. And of course, if you miss midnight, people are struggling to get home on the tubes, etc, etc. So our show on Saturday plans to finish between 11:30 and 11:45. Get people, get out, get the tube, transport home, buses, etc, etc. Sometimes there'll be shows that go later, but generally it would be because of a US broadcast partner. If it was HBO taking it live, you've seen it for Froch Butte, didn't start till midnight. Froch against Pascal was 3 or 4 in the morning in Nottingham. So, generally we want to make sure everything's wrapped up by midnight. And of course, the earlier you finish, the more chance you've got of getting it in the papers the next day. If you finish at 11:30, you've got no chance because it's all, everything's written up for the papers. But always by midnight we try and have our shows done.
Okay. Phil Joseph, great roster you've put together at Matchroom, Eddie, but given how many top boxers you look after, how hard is it to keep them all happy at once?
I think at the moment we've got the perfect mix in terms of dates and fighters. These pay-per-view shows will help us build a much deeper card. So, on a normal Saturday night fight night, I might put on 3 or 4 title fights. Where on the Froch Groves undercard, you'll see me put on minimum 6, 7, maybe even 8 title fights on that card. So it lets me keep those guys active. If I didn't have that, I think we might struggle with the dates with the amount of fighters we've signed. But at the moment, everything's absolutely perfect. I've got the right amount of dates where I can let the youngsters learn and box as frequently as they need to. I've got your interim fighters who, are people like Lee Selby, people like Kevin Mitchell, Crawler, Brian Rose, where I can box them 4 or 5 times a year. And then I've got your elite level fighters, your world champs, who really only need to box 2, maybe 3 times a year because, the situation's a lot different. So I think at the moment, the mix is absolutely perfect.
Okay. Dave Rowley or Rowley, what's the most brutal spar you've ever seen?
That's a good question. That's the ticket. The best spar I've ever seen was probably between Cal Yafai, before I signed him, and this Filipino from the national team. And it was in the GB setup in Sheffield. You've got the main ring and a couple other big rings. And then over on the side, you just got 2 little rings, size, 12 foot or something like that. And these two just absolutely punched holes out of each other. It was unbelievable to watch, and that's what made me watch Yafai for the first time. I was like, who is this kid? Professionally, Froch has had some great spars with Callum Smith. Froch has had some great spars with Bellew that I've seen. I've seen a lot of good spars. Eubank Jr. when he come down and sparred with John Ryder quite a while ago was a good spar to watch. Seen some great spars.
Okay. Racer, I know you joke about Froch being your best fighter. Are you concerned some of the other fighters will subconsciously be pissed off about this?
No. I think because of what he's achieved, it's so clear cut that I hope they'd understand. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not going to, when I say he's my best fighter, it doesn't mean that my 99% of my attention is on Carl Froch. Just for me, he's my favourite fighter. Do you know what I mean? So, the danger you have is that when you grow the stable, people start to think, oh, I'm gone down the pecking order. But, we try and make sure that doesn't happen. Like I said, we're bringing in this new guy going to be starting soon to handle more stuff on the commercial side for fighters. But we have got a big stable, but everyone is in my thoughts at all time.
Okay. I probably don't help this situation.
Well, yeah, but you definitely don't help the situation.
All right, maybe I'll just be quiet.
Yeah.
Ish. DJ Boydie. Ooh, DJ on the phone. As a fan, do you agree there should be only one world champion per weight class? But as a promoter, do you agree that there should be multiple world champions per weight class?
Ticket.
Definitely.
I am very, very pro different governing bodies in boxing, so multiple world titles. I'm also very pro, and people might not agree with me on this, the interim belts and the intercontinental belts. And let me tell you why. Because it gives young fighters the opportunity to have championship bouts under championship conditions, and also gives them an opportunity to elevate themselves within a certain organisation. And it's all about strategy, and you can't just have one world champion because no one's going to get to fight for it. There's going to be so many inactive fighters, and we have 4, in my opinion, recognised governing bodies, world title bodies: the WBC, the WBA, the IBF, and the WBO. And I think that's fine. And sometimes you talk about super champions and interim champions. It's a difficult job for the governing bodies to keep everyone active. Sometimes a fighter's looking at another kind of fight. Sometimes he's unifying the division, and then you've got people that have been queuing up over time for a shot. But I think the intercontinental belts and the international belts, I think they're great, because you look at someone like Callum Smith. He'll fight for the WBC international title probably in his next fight. It's great for Callum. We can bring over an American opponent, and without that, he'd have to fight for the English title, of which there are no other opponents for him. And then he's got to fight for a British title. Well, he can't. His brother's got to. So, what do? You can't just be in meaningless bouts. So as long as the decision process is right, and the WBC is a good example of that, whereby, Callum Smith has been accepted to fight for the WBC international title. They want to know who he's fighting. I've sent them through a list of a couple. Don't like him. He's not good enough. He's coming off a loss. He's not credible enough. They're almost matching themselves. But if we didn't have the mixture of the world championship bodies, would Darren Barker be a world champion? No. Would Jamie McDonnell be a world champion? No. Would Ricky Burns be a champion? Maybe. But I just think that there can't be one, because it's just, and from a purist perspective, I know that idea sounds nice, but I just think, because of the amount of fighters and the amount of politics, I think, whilst there's decisions I'm sure that will rattle the hardcore fans that the governing bodies make, the world bodies make, I think generally it's a decent setup.
Okay. Kyle Rayner. Is Kevin Mitchell versus Burns a potential rematch due to Burns being on the slip and Mitchell being on the rise?
Well, I mean, look, it's a bit difficult to say that Kevin Mitchell's on the rise at the moment. He's just had an 8-round fight against a journeyman, which he looked okay in. Saturday's the test. He fights Marco Lopez.
Sorry, the other parts of this, which is the same question, it just says Burns loses title to one of your fighters. Better, surely.
Not really. Harder, surely, because you've got 2 fighters in the fight who you're very fond of. Do you know what I mean? I'd like to try and avoid that where possible. Do you know what I mean? But for me, going back to what I said, Mitchell's got a test this Saturday. He looks more determined and more dedicated and fitter in the gym than I've ever seen him. You saw him the other day. He's in great spirits. Ricky's got other things to deal with. He's got Beltran, he's got Crawford, we've got unifications to deal with. The plan for Kevin Mitchell is to have a big domestic fight, whether that's against his stablemate, Crawler, whether that's against Derry Matthews, which is the one I'd prefer. That's the priority. I don't think Burns-Mitchell is one that could happen. It's happened and it didn't go Kevin's way, but my priority with Kevin is to move him into other world bodies, which we talked about earlier. But Burns-Mitchell's not one that's on the radar.
Okay. Lee Arthur, Kugan, can you ask Eddie if he's ever going to bring a show to the Metro Radio Arena in Newcastle? Seems there's like a Matchroom show everywhere else, but might not be any great local stars, but just a good card for some North East fans to go and see. Hashtag make it happen.
It's difficult because you're kind of taking a punt. If you're going to a town where there's no tickets, or you're taking no ticket sellers to, and you're just taking one of your marquee names, there's always the risk that it might not sell. Whereas if you take that marquee name to their hometown, you're confident that it's going to sell and it's going to do the numbers. Interestingly, the second ever prize fighter was at the Metro Arena in Newcastle, Heavyweights 2, the one that Sam Sexton won. So we were there. It was a decent turnout, but there are a lot of popular young fighters in Newcastle. It's one of the areas that we'd like to expand to, Birmingham being another one. So hopefully in time. But I do think we need a marquee fighter from the northeast to make it a regular stop.
Okay. Mush Edwards, could be Mush Edwards. Does Eddie have a contingency plan if the Sky TV contract was come to an end? And if so, can he give us an insight to what it would be?
Well, there'll be an announcement on that on Friday at our big press conference. But, we've got another year left on the Sky contract at the moment. For me, they're the partner that I want. They're the partner that I've always wanted. They're the ones that believe in the sport of boxing. They're the ones that believe in me and us and our fighters. And I wouldn't want to go anywhere else. They've got the perfect platform to cross-promote and cross-sell. They get behind the weigh-ins, the press conferences. They've got the ringside show. For me, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. We've been a partner of Sky Sports for many years across various platforms and various different sports. And I don't think it's, I know that we could take our product elsewhere. I'm not interested to take it elsewhere. I think we've got the perfect platform, and long may that continue.
Okay. Dan Ransom. Is there any chance of getting Golovkin over here to fight if the fights for him in America aren't that lucrative at the moment, i.e. for Barker?
Well, Barker's got Sturm, then he's got Gill, and then Murray, hopefully, or Macklin. Golovkin is a beast of a fight. He's the best in the division, in my opinion. And the only way you're going to fight Golovkin is for fortunes of money. So, maybe that's available. But I think if Golovkin's going to fight anyone from the UK, I think the number one choice will be Murray, because I think his options are limited. And I think that the other one is Froch. I think Froch would fight Golovkin next. McCracken likes the Golovkin fight. I don't think, funnily enough, Golovkin is overly keen. His team on the Froch fight. That's what I've heard out of various sources in America. So I just think it's a wonderful fight. And if Golovkin keeps going the way he's going, that's going to be pay-per-view in the US and the UK. So you're talking about huge money. So, it's all about the package. It's all about the opportunities for the fighters. And unfortunately, sometimes fans don't like to hear, but the money is the key element. This is a job like anything else, and this is people's future and livelihood. And they don't just box because people like to watch them. They box to set themselves up for life.
Okay. Sam Little. I think you and Big Bazza Hearn are marketing geniuses, but what I want to know is, what is your biggest business failure that no one would have heard about?
Ticket. Mainly for the compliment. No one would have heard about.
Oh, that's.
In a boxing sense, what people won't know about me is that after I worked in the West End for a sports agency and sports marketing company, etc., I set up a golf management company where I was representing golfers on the PGA Tour and European Tour. Now, I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I was just swanning around like a young Jerry Maguire, signing golfers left, right and centre. But I understood the basic elements of athlete representation through my experience and marketing and sales. So I was quite successful at it. But, there was a period where I was on the US tour signing golfers and, hanging out with Tiger Woods and, I've dropped another name down there. But, it was a mad time and it was a success. I don't think it was, the greatest financial reward I've ever achieved, but I wouldn't say that was a failure. I would say the biggest failure in boxing sense is probably working with Audley Harrison. And I say that because there was a lot of pleasure in that as well, and the journey was fantastic and it was a great learning experience, but ultimately it ended in tears, really. And I'm quite pleased at the way that I've pulled that round, because after that I could barely walk down the street for a couple of weeks because it was terrible. But I look back at the positives of that experience. I've taken him from absolutely nowhere to prize fighter, to the European title, to David Hay in 3 steps. And that has actually showing people the ambition and the versatility to make those moves that put me in the position I'm in today. But I think failure-wise, that night at the MEN against David Hay was pretty tough. I mean, especially as a rookie, which I was. Now I'd just brush it off and say it's just boxing, it happens. Sometimes you have stinkers.
Find someone else the next day.
Yeah, but back then it was like, for me, I was dreaming that we were going to have this story where we've got the heavyweight champion of the world, and we were so far off in reality that you learn a lot from those kind of situations.
Okay. Pete Tunney, do contracts vary considerably between each boxer you sign, or are they generally on the same percent? What is the most generous contract you have offered, and who has the best contract in your stable?
Obviously, my contracts are limited. Some promoters are going to give you contracts like that. If truth be known, I prefer a one-pager. If the fighter doesn't want to be with you, then there's no relationship moving forward. You're better off without them. Some promoters act very differently. They'll never let fighters go. They'll sue. They'll this. They'll that. For me, if you do a good job for a fighter, they won't want to leave. If you've got the best opportunities for the fighter and the best platform, they won't want to leave. Sometimes people think the grass is greener. Sometimes, people think that there's bigger opportunities out there. For me, at the moment, there is no bigger opportunity in British boxing than to be with Matchroom Sport and Sky. So therefore, I don't need to tie fighters down on 5-year deals with contracts like that. At the end of the day, most contracts can be broken. And especially for fighters in this kind of business where you've got young men who are putting their, health on the line in a job that's very, very difficult. It's hard to hold on to a contract. I rely more on personal relationships, and it's a dangerous strategy. But, if fighters want to leave, they want to leave. And, it would be disappointing. But look at the likes of Frampton. I had him on a fight-by-fight deal. We couldn't come to terms, so he goes. That's fine, If they think the grass is greener elsewhere, then let him go. But generally, I've never had a fighter that's under contract that wants to leave.
Okay. Sean Regan, Eddie, you once said that you wouldn't have the Brook fight. You wouldn't have Brook fight Van Heerden for the IBO title because you don't see it as a significant title. Does this mean that when Ricky Hatton won it, the IBO title, that wasn't a real title when he defended it against Pac-Man and Malignaggi?
Yeah, but that was partly, I don't know if they were unifications with other belts as well. It's more about the fight than the belts. The IBO does a great job, don't get me wrong. Just for me as a fan, I don't recognise it as one of the leading world organisations in boxing, which we talked about before.
Would you say it was fifth?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Because what else would you say was fifth? WBF, I would say it's fifth, but it's not really. People talk about the Van Heerden fight. I wouldn't necessarily. I've been talking to Van Heerden about fighting Lee Purdy. We're not looking at that fight because Van Heerden's got the IBO belt. We're looking at that fight because it's a good fight and he's quite well ranked in the world. Do you know what I mean? So, in terms of Ricky Hatton defending that belt, I didn't see that as a genuine world title defence. No. But I saw that as a great fight, some of the fights that he was in. Do you know what I mean? So,
didn't Ricky Hatton have the Ring Magazine belt as well?
Yeah, but that's the Ring Magazine belt, no disrespect to the belt, is worthless. But credibility-wise, it perhaps supersedes the others. If you talk to fighters, Ricky Burns in particular, Tony Bellew, who's got a chance to win it against Adonis Stevenson, the ring belt is one they really, really want. When Froch fought Ward, that was one of the things he was most disappointed that he didn't get a ring belt. It's a magazine, for God's sake. But going back to the IBO, I couldn't put my fighter in a fight for the IBO title and tell you if he won, he'd become world champion. It's not in my makeup. I just wouldn't feel right.
Okay. Davey Effort. This is the name on your email. Buncey says you have no issue with him. No, Buncey says you and him have no issue, but there is obviously an issue with him and Matchroom and you. Why is he so bitter? This is from Davey Effort.
I'll give him a ticket for that. I can't answer the question about why Bunce is how he is. Steve Bunce works for Frank Warren. quite straightforward, you know, and Box Nation, effectively Frank Warren. So really, he's got a job to do. You know, he cannot be impartial because he works for a rival promoter. Do I have an issue with Steve Bunce as a person? No. Do I have an issue with his morality? You know, in terms of impartial views on boxing? Probably. Because I can't take what he says seriously because he can't be impartial. And, you know, when I watched his interview with you the other day, talking about, you know, he said that I Film London is not coverage. And then his explanation of that was not the most convincing, where he said, yeah, but what these people have got to understand is all these people in that boat, and it's not a criticism of them, it's a criticism of their age bracket and an understanding of the market, my dad included. People aren't as interested to pick up the paper anymore and read a long report about the fight. And don't get me wrong, there's still a market for it, but it's like this, and it's the hardcore element, the old school that want to read. Now, he talked about if he wanted to read a report of a fight, he's got no interest in watching you sitting down and having a 10-minute interview. People want video content to their mobile phone. People want something different. People want some light-hearted stuff, something that goes a little bit deeper, not this is the report of the fight, this is what happened in the 5th round, this is what happened in the 6th round. You know, the world is changing, and some people can't embrace that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been as successful, because I understand the market and I understand the trends. But in answer to the overall question, I don't have anything, you know, no fallouts with Steve Bunce. He just works for Frank Warren. He's got a job to do. If he worked for me, the stuff he said would be totally different. You know, and it applies to Steve Lillis as well. You know, he works for Frank Warren. So they can't be impartial in that respect. They've got a boss. So it's just like if someone worked for me, I wouldn't expect them to slag me off or talk down about my product. You know, you get what you pay for.
This is how people know that I don't work for you, because I slag
yeah, but you
you
don't
off.
work for me. But you know, listen, we get on well, and I think you're a fan, but you like what we do. But it doesn't mean you haven't got your own views. But you know, it's difficult for people to be impartial when they've got a paymaster who is your competitor.
Okay. Paul Dobson, what do you think makes more money? 2 Sky box office fights a year, or a year's worth of subscriptions to Box Nation?
Well, without doing the maths of that, what some people have got to understand is Sky Sports is not a boxing channel. You know, when people turn around and say, "Oh, I'm paying 50 quid a month for 3 boxing shows," no. You're paying 50 quid a month for Premier League football, rugby, the US Open golf, the US Open tennis. They would never try and compete with Box Nation because it's totally off the chart. You know, so I think Box Nation, you know, does a good job. I think it has some great fights on the channel. Long term, I still don't believe there's the demand for a subscription boxing channel. But still, I think there's some quality fights on there. But don't compare the two, because one is a sports channel with the very best sports content from all over the world, and one is a subscription boxing channel with, you know, some weeks nothing on, other weeks 2 or 3 fights on show. So, you know, I think if you like boxing, great, get them both, you know, but you can't compare the two because, you know, I don't think, you know, you can never class Sky Sports as a boxing channel, but one thing we're pushing for is more and more boxing. And you've seen that with the start of the season, you know, not just the big fights domestically, but of course Cotto against Rodriguez, Stevenson against Cloud, Marquez against Bradley, Provodnikov against Alvarado, and another one to be announced tomorrow as well. So I'm kind of getting my way because I do feel we need the international content to provide the all-round experience for the Sky Sports boxing fan.
Okay. What is the ultimate fight that you have in your sights in the next couple of years? This is from Ryan Flynn.
I still want to make Brook against Khan. It's, you know, it's something that I really want to make. I'd like to make Froch against Golovkin. I'd still like to make Golovkin against Froch against Ward in the UK. I'd like to make Barker against Martinez. as a unification fight in the UK. I would like to make Burns against Vasquez in a unification. I'd like to make Bellew against Hopkins potentially at Goodison Park. Even though I know it's potentially not the greatest fight of all time, I just think it's a great occasion. I'd love to make Callum Smith against Frank Buglioni, but that ain't going to happen in a million years. There's loads of fights out there.
Okay. Let's try and fly through some of these.
Okay.
This is from Dave the Rave. No, just Dave Rave, who sent in about 50 questions.
Okay.
Dave did say just one question.
He might get a ticket then.
Okay. Have you seen the video George Groves posted of Carl Froch? And did Carl Froch pick up the contradiction bug from you?
Fucking, he ain't getting a ticket then. Actually, no, give him the ticket because he sent
a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's actually quite a good question.
I don't think I contradict. I saw the video. I thought it was quite funny. I don't think generally I contradict. If you show me the contradictions, I think I can explain most of them. I think everybody contradicts themselves what they say. But what people have got to understand is things change, positions change, life changes. So something you said 6 months ago about a fighter doesn't apply now. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Okay. So if I'm saying, Brooke would never do this, or Brooke would never, and then he lost, or then he would have to go back and do that. If I would have said, Kell Brook will definitely fight for a world title next, and then he doesn't, and I'm talking about another fight, my contradiction was no, because he had to pull out injured. He got it, but so things change. Is what I'm saying. Right. But I saw the video, and it was quite amusing in parts.
Okay. Ronan Moran, my question is, could it be Team Matchroom's plans to put Anthony Joshua in a heavyweight prize fighter to gain experience and rounds, or would that be too risky at this stage of Anthony's career?
No, I don't think it's what he needs. I think he'd do well. Obviously, he's got the amateur experience, but I think we've got to bring him on the right way, and I don't think that involves prize fighter at the moment.
Okay. James Gavin, would you ever open up your own boxing gym? Sponsor gyms for open to carry on the legacy the Hearn name is already creating?
No, but we've got plans to open a gym for our sort of London-based fighters around here. Hopefully in the next year. We looked at a premises recently and we lost it. Unfortunately, it would have been perfect, but we've got a lot of fighters now in the south, and I'd like a base for Matchroom to showcase the fighters on. And obviously anyone else that comes down for sparring and filming and stuff like that. So that is in the plans in 2014.
You lost out?
Yeah, well, we bid on a place and lost it.
You lost on a bid?
Another bid we lost.
God.
It's good to lose sometimes.
Parag Shah, with Golden Boy planning shows here, what do you think about a mega UK versus USA pay-per-view show? For example, you could have Brook versus Broner, Barker versus Quillen, Bellew versus B-Hop.
All these ideas are great, but then when people start talking, it's like Hey Fury, and people say, why don't you put Frampton against Quigg on the undercard? Because the money's not there. So all those fights you're talking about,
it's mega.
It is. Yeah. And in answer to your question, Golden Boy are coming to do shows in the UK. Are they? They've done one in, when was that?
They've done one with Khan.
Oh, hello.
Sorry, should have put that on.
Yeah, but that was the only one. I think that they've got a market that they understand and they're very successful in. I don't think that they'd probably come over, run a show, and realise, well, there ain't as much money over it. So but I talk to Golden Boy all the time. I've got a great relationship with them. Up for listening, up for experimenting.
Okay, Daniel James. Please ask Eddie if he would be interested in signing James DeGale, and as he could do well but needs fights.
James DeGale's situation is a frustrating one, isn't it? I mean, he seems to make a lot of wrong decisions, and he seems to be unhappy a lot and doesn't really fight that regularly, whatever happens to him. I made him an offer when he left Frank Warren, and he chose to go with Mick Hennessy. So, I would never close the door on a fighter, but our position's changed significantly since then. This was a long time ago. So I think he's a very talented fighter, but he's stalling and his commercial value is diminishing by the day. So, but he's still got a lot to give in the sport. But I just don't know when he's fighting again. I mean, you probably know more as much as me.
Okay, Shane Rothwell, if you could only promote one weight class, what would it be and why?
Well, I'm a little bit more of a purist. I know everyone talks about the heavyweight division, but I like the lightweight division. I think it's such a great division. And taking away even how many great fighters we've got in that division, I think that for me, it's always been a really entertaining division.
Okay. Mike Duffy. Eddie, would you be an advocate of open scoring to maybe stop the controversy of some judges' scorecards? Would this have any benefit or effect? Interested to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, ticket for that one. Well, WBC have got an open scoring policy in some territories, and some commissions allow it, some don't. The British Boxing Board of Control don't allow it. I don't think it would necessarily change a lot of the scoring. For me, as a TV product, part of the whole and the new and still is very, very exciting. So obviously you're watching a fight and you know who's winning all the time. It's not as exciting. There could be elements where it is quite exciting when you know the guy needs to win the last round. But what happens when there's a fight that some bloke's winning by 6 rounds and the other guy's not in it? You just turn the TV off, So part of the suspense, I think, is part of the attraction. But again, I do. There's just sometimes people score badly, and we've seen it before, and and it's really down to the organisations to make sure that they've got the judges in place that are of a quality. I think it's a quality control issue from the commissions and from the governing bodies and the organisations to make sure that all judges are worthy of their place.
Okay. Josh McCaskill, I believe it is. Is Sky's decision to show more overseas fights a reaction to the competition from Box Nation, or is it from the increasing popularity of the sport in recent times?
It's a good question. That's a ticket. How many tickets? I don't want to give away too many tickets. Yeah, how many are we giving away? About 6, aren't we? 6 pairs. No, it's nothing to do with Box Nation. What it is about is it's about understanding the market, understanding what I feel the viewers want. You got to understand that international shows on Sky deliver very small numbers because they're for the hardcore boxing fan. So, at the end of the day, I don't think Sky have to do it, but I just feel they should do it to wrap up the all-round package. And the main reason that they're doing it now is because they've seen the popularity of boxing increase. The bigger shows are creating bigger numbers. The box office is doing very, very well. The look and the feel of the boxing product in general is fantastic. They're seeing crowds in arenas go up, more interested in boxing, more people talking about boxing. So let's do more boxing. And it's pretty cheap, to be honest with you, to pick up most of the international content. And the plan is to pick up much more along the way.
Okay. Taz Ali, my question is, what is a normal day in the life of Eddie Fastcar Hearn?
But it depends where I am, and everything's different. This morning, I've got 2 daughters, and one of them just every night relentlessly in our room. So I got kicked out of bed this morning at about 4:30. Was laying on the floor actually. It's about 5:30, and I creeped down, went down the gym, come back, cooked a bit of breakfast for the girls and my missus, had a shower, dropped my little one at school, and then came in the office. I'm here all day. And then, that's the time when I don't get as much time as I'd like in the office. So these kind of days are quite nice for me, even though I'm spending about 2 hours with you doing this.
Charming.
But, then generally on fight week, for example, Thursday tomorrow, we'll have a press conference at 12:30 in London. I'll meet all the fighters. I'll sit down with all the fighters, have a chat, see other people, have meetings, deal with Sky. Friday is, of course, the weigh-in, so we'll be down at the O2 for that. And then Saturday is fight day. Most nights, if I'm in the office, I try and get home by 7 o'clock, see the kids before they go to sleep, have a bit of dinner with the missus or go out for a bite to eat, come back, watch a bit of TV, and then I'm just really on the internet working, just whether it's box rec, whether it's talking to other promoters from around the world. You know, the night time is time for my US business to kick in. You know, the East Coast, you know, I'm dealing with people around 2, 3, 4 o'clock, and on the West Coast, I'm dealing with people generally 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, midnight. You know, find it difficult to sleep most nights because my brain's just going mad. So some nights I sleep better than others, but you know, generally that's a day in the life, and everything's different, but 110% effort at all times.
Okay. Rob W. If Froch won't give up his belt and Groves won't give up his mandatory spot, then why in the world is this fight pay-per-view? It surely has to happen anyway.
This is the most ridiculous question ever. A couple of people said this on Twitter. Froch would just, you know, the reason, what happens is in this situation, Carl Froch is the champion. He has to make a mandatory defence. If he doesn't make the mandatory defence, he gives up his belt, right? George Groves is the mandatory challenger, right? If George Groves doesn't accept the fight, he loses his mandatory position. Speak to both of them. No one want to give it up. They don't like each other, you know. So anyway, so if I said to George Groves, people say about that comment, well, George Groves would fight for the belt for nothing. Bollocks. Absolute bollocks. If I went up to George Groves and said, here's 100 grand to fight Carl Froch, but come on, George, you're getting the chance to fight him. Not in a million years. People understand the value of the fight. And same with Carl Froch. You know, if I went to Carl Froch and said, Carl, and actually if this fight wasn't on pay-per-view, you know, the numbers would be so significantly less. Carl Froch would vacate the belt because he'd fight someone else, and you wouldn't get a chance to see this fight happen. So it's not that they haven't got a choice. They've always got choices. But he would vacate the belt if there was no money in the fight. As it happens, it's sold out in 15 minutes and it's going to be on pay-per-view. So, but George Groves is not an idiot. He doesn't just fight for nothing, regardless of the... You know, if the only option to him was 100 grand, he'd vacate his position. You know, and Froch would do the same if there was zero money in the fight. And actually, if it was... I mean, a good example was next in line, I think, was Thomas Oosterhausen. If we would have gone down to Oosterhausen, we probably would have relinquished the belt because there's no money in the fight. So just because, you know, people got to understand, this is a job. People get paid what they should be getting paid, not just do it because the fans want it and because, you know, they're in a mandatory position. At the end of the day, if the deal's not right, they won't take the fight. Or if the fight's not right, and Groves or Froch, you know, we would have had a major issue if we wouldn't have had the revenues from pay-per-view.
Okay, let's try and fly through this. Eddie, do you think that British boxing will ever be in a position to bring the world's best fighters, biggest draws, to fight in the UK regularly? And if so, what steps do you think the UK promoters need to take in order for that to happen?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily what steps to take. It's, you know, the pay-per-view model at the moment is the only model that can bring the major fights to the UK. I say major, I say the huge fights to the UK, you know. And unfortunately, that is the situation. Until we grow the sport and make it big enough that the broadcasters will pay the relevant rights fees, which we've got a lot of work to do, then it's just not going to happen. How can it when you've got HBO, Showtime in America paying millions of dollars of rights fee, when you've got Sat1, you know, in Germany paying millions of dollars or millions of euros of rights fees? You know, it's just, that's just business. That's just a model. That's just the way of the world. What we've got to keep doing is increasing the popularity of sport, drive the ticket numbers up, you know, bring revenue from there, start trying to exploit the international broadcast territories better, syndicate our shows in other countries. We're doing that much more successfully now, and try and build the sport and create the viewing figures that broadcasters are saying, here's more money for boxing. You know, and we're getting there, but it's a slow process. But at least for the time being, we have got the other option to bring the fights here.
Okay, Joe Tompkins. Eddie, do you think that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter that's ever lived after his schooling of Canelo?
No. I mean, you can't. In my opinion, you can't compare him to a Sugar Ray Robinson or even perhaps a Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, I just find him quite dull to watch. I think he's a genius. I think he's technically on another level, but to watch for the casual fans and I don't know, certainly the greatest fighter of his generation.
Okay. Paul Liddell, if Bellew was to lose to Stevenson, would a move up to cruiserweight be considered? I think he has had a great chance, but with 2 failed attempts, it might be hard to sell him at light heavy. but I think he'd be a world champion at cruiser.
Well, I think he's going to beat Stevenson, firstly. Number two, a lot said about Bellew's weight, and people think that he struggles at the weight. I've never seen him in one fight that we've had him struggle at the weight. I think he does it very professionally. He's got a good team. Cruiserweight's a big jump. You're in with some big boys. Do you know what I mean? So, but there are some big fights up there at cruiserweight. You know, the Hook and the Arslan, and you know, Sauerlands are crying out for some cruiserweight meat, if you like. But I think Tony Bellew's future's at light heavyweight. I think he makes the weight well. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but I think he's going to do the business in Canada.
Okay, Sam Kenny, what's more important as a promoter, the amount of money a fighter can earn or your relationship with the fighter?
Well, it works hand in hand, doesn't it? If you're paying a fighter a load of money, your relationship's very good. But, you know, my responsibility to all my fighters is to create the best opportunities for them. And when I say the best opportunities, the financial opportunity plays a huge part within that. I want to see all my fighters set up for life financially. I never want to see my fighter in 10 or 20 years struggling to earn a living and he's back out on the road or whatever he's doing. And people like Darren Barker, you know, this is what gives me more pleasure than anything, that I can give Darren Barker the opportunity to set himself up for life financially. And don't get me wrong, we want to win. We always want to win, and we'll try and get every edge we can. But sometimes you've got to realise what you're in this sport for, and that is to basically make sure you and your family are taken care of. And that comes by earning as much money as possible, you know. And personal relationships are great. I've got great relationships with all my fighters. But the bottom line is, nothing makes me happier than seeing my fighter pay off his mortgage, than seeing my fighter with enough dough around him that he's going to be comfortable for life. My fighter rock down the Aston Martin garage at the end of the day and treat himself to a car that he never thought he'd have. To take him up to Jeweller's and get him a lovely Rolex that he dreamed of having for 10 years. You know, I don't want to be materialistic, but let's just have it right here. Let's understand that this is a tough business and they deserve every penny they get. And for me, that is the most important thing, to see my fighters set up for life.
All right. Christian Lowe, hi, Kugan Eddie, keep up the good work, thank you. Would Eddie consider putting on a full show with Frank Warren with fights like Brook versus Gavin, Saunders, Barker, Chisora, Joshua, Bullioni, Smith, Butler fight? Obviously, to get the timing right for every fighter would be hard, but would be brilliant for British boxing.
The answer is no. I mean, obviously, you know, what people have got to understand is I've got a contract with Sky Sports. It's my job to make sure that all my fighters remain on Sky Sports. What will happen is, in purse bid scenarios, you'll get fighters on each other's cards. You've seen recently, Liam Smith just fought Eric Ocheng on my show. Paul Smith fought Tony Dodson on my show. John Ryder fought Billy Joe Saunders on Frank Warren's show, etc., etc. And that's fine, I don't mind that, but it's really my job to keep my fighters on Sky Sports, and to be honest with you, that's where they want to be. So, you know, the John Ryder, Billy Joe Saunders situation, John Ryder got a fantastic payday for that fight, no objections at all. And I'm sure that'll happen again. But all those fights, no, I mean, look, we make offers to them. You know, we just offered Buglioni a load of money to fight Smith. That's never going to happen, and they'll make offers to us, and you know, some will happen and some won't, but generally it's our job to keep our fighters on Sky Sports and also where they want to be.
Okay. Rob Allenby, do you think there is a possibility of a British middleweight Super 6 style competition? Barker, Macklin, Murray, Saunders, Ryder, Danny Butler?
I'm sure about Danny Butler, but he's doing well, he's English champ. The problem comes, I was thinking about this the other day, is these great domestic fights happen when people have limited opportunities. And when someone gets good opportunities or wins something big, they don't really want to be part of the domestic scene because they've got world ambitions. Do you understand what I'm saying? So with a lightweight situation, you know, you've got there a perfect example of domestically, you know, this sort of gridlock, if you like, with Matthews, Crawler, even Reese, Coyle, where, you know, potentially that they deserve a world title shot, but at the moment, when you look at the division, nothing's really available to them. If Anthony Crawler wins a world title, he's not really going to be interested in giving Gavin Rees or Anthony Crotter shot, he's going to be looking at unifying the division or fighting a big name. And that's the same with, just because Darren Barker won the world title, people say now, oh, he has to fight Martin Murray. He doesn't have to fight Martin Murray. That's a great domestic fight. Hopefully we can make that if the money's there. But he's got ambitions to fight Martinez and unify the division, fight Stern for fortunes. So before Barker won the world title, Murray against Barker was probably more realistic than it is now. But hopefully we can get there, because we've seen, ratings-wise and bums on seats, domestic fights work.
Okay. K-Mac Designs. The fight the whole world wanted to see, but never happened. Apollo Creed versus Clubber Lang. Who wins and how?
Apollo Creed. Clubber Lang's just too crude for him. Apollo Creed was the man, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest.